everybody. It's the MPG Real Estate Show. I'm your host, Josh Moser. This week I got Sean Williams.
Hey, how's it going?
What's up, man? How's it going?
So far, so good.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, cheers.
Cheers. Drinking Irish whiskey, Proper 12.
My favorite.
It was a good choice. I actually bought it. I bought some last week just because in the name of testing it before.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's it went down easy.
What do you normally drink?
I would say my go-to, it's probably just beer.
Just beer, okay.
Yeah. Normally my go-to is beer, but I have been getting a little bit more into whiskeys and spirits since I've been doing the podcast, just because we were talking a little bit before the show is, there's been such a diversity of requests.
Right.
So it's kind of got, which I did that on purpose to test me a little bit.
Yeah.
So, but I definitely would add Proper 12 in my arsenal. The spirit's kind of nice.
Yeah, it's a good one. I'm a big fan. When I'm out and about, I'm normally like a Coors Light, which is basically water. But I'll start sometimes downtown. I'll have a little Irish whiskey old fashioned, which is absolutely delicious. So what is
Proper 12 not considered old fashioned? What is the difference?
So old fashioned is traditionally bourbon. So it's bourbon muddled with orange, a little bit of orange, a cherry with some bitters. Sometimes people put a splash in it, but it's basically whiskey, bitters, orange, and cherry. And it's 99% of the time it's bourbon. But I was sitting there one day, I'm like, hey, can you guys make me one with Irish whiskey? They're like, absolutely, and it's delicious.
What?
Yeah, it's delicious.
Okay, I'll have to try sometime.
Yeah.
So I guess let's just jump right into it.
Yes, sir.
Kind of the classic question.
Yep.
The trajectory from when you graduate high school to right now.
Okay, yeah. So, very interesting. So like I told you earlier, I grew up here in Savannah, actually Tybee. I was born and raised on Tybee. Went to grade school down there. High school at BC, traditional Savannah kid. And went to Armstrong. Graduated from there in 91. And I had always had an interest in the film industry. My dad did some film work in the 70s and 80s. He was good friends with Stratton Leopold from Leopold Ice Cream here in town. Back then Stratton was doing primarily location and a little bit of line producer work. This is before he moved to LA and became a big movie producer. And my dad did, little stuff here and there, like he'd work with the stunt team as a mechanic, or he'd provide, random services as a mechanic. So I had an interest from being on a couple of film sets. So I moved to Atlanta briefly, got a little bit of experience up there. I was hired, my first job in the industry, I was hired as a driver for Jessica Tandy. And she and I got along great. It's to me, it was like driving around my grandmother. And I got to hang out with Bridget Fonda at the same time, which was fun. She and her husband were doing another movie in Georgia, just a few months later, and he asked me to be his assistant. So I was Hume Cronin's assistant. And then from there, I was a production assistant on a movie that they shot here in Savannah called Now and Then. I was a production assistant on Forrest Gump that shot here and in Beaufort. And the director from Now and Then at the end of production said, hey, I'm going to need him an assistant in LA. My assistant's moving back to Scotland. Do you want to come out and work 6 months? So I was like, sure. So I went up there for 6 months, ended up staying 25 years, which was great. I had a lot of fun. My film industry career lasted from 91 to probably about 2001, when I had just gotten burned out. I had, kind of worked my way up. Once I got to LA, I'd worked for James Cameron's first ex-wife, Gail Ann Hurd, who currently produces The Walking Dead.
What?
Yeah.
Dang.
And that's where I first got my feet wet on the real estate industry. Was working for her. She was her father was a developer, Palm Springs, in the 1950s. She had
the 50s?
Yeah, in the 1950s.
Oh my gosh, so he made
Yep, he was very successful, Mr. Hurd. And Gail herself had quite a few real estate holdings there that she had inherited from her father, and she also, was very successful in the film industry and continues to be. So she had quite a few private residences, and learning how she structured her universe and how she managed all her holdings was very interesting. It was kind of a crash course in not only working on movies, getting movies made, but also dealing with high net worth individuals. So I did that till about 2001. Then I was hired temporarily as doing some marketing at Toyota headquarters in Torrance, California, which was just 10 minutes from my house at the time.
How'd you get into that?
I had a friend that worked for the temp agency, and they were like, hey, we need somebody to come in and do these specific things. I was like, yeah, I could do that. So I went in, and I ended up, after a year as a temp, I got hired full-time in the Toyota marketing department. Worked primarily on the financial services side, helped launch the Scion brand, launched a couple of Toyota credit cards, eventually switched over into social media, was the first Lexus full-time hire to do social media for Lexus. From there, I got recruited over to Hyundai, which was just starting their turnaround with their new designs, and got a little more budget. While I was at Hyundai, I not only did their social media, but also managed their entertainment and sports partnerships to a degree. I ended up working with my old boss, Gail, who was, at that time, Hyundai was integrated into the Walking Dead television show. So we did a couple of big campaigns around The Walking Dead, and those went really well. And then the next year was the World Cup, and Hyundai is a worldwide sponsor for that. And they didn't have anybody that really knew or was involved in soccer. And I was like, hey, I've got some friends that play club soccer and play pro soccer for LA Galaxy. And they're like, perfect, you can manage the World Cup program. So I did that, and they both won Effie Awards each year. From there, I was recruited over to BuzzFeed, and I ran the automobile partnerships at BuzzFeed in LA.
And what year is this?
This is now 2016, 2017.
Okay.
And from there, I was recruited to work for Gary Vaynerchuk at his ad agency in LA, doing work for Toyota, my old friends. I was on the agency side with them, and helped relaunch the Toyota 86. It had been a Scion vehicle. Toyota shuttered the Scion brand and shifted some of the vehicles over to the Toyota side, and they needed help relaunching them. So I had a hand in that. And from there, I got recruited to another agency called Civic Entertainment, which is owned by Ryan Seacrest, and they have a multi-year deal with Ford Motor Company to help promote the Ford brand in entertainment partnerships.
Dang.
So I did that, and I finally got tired of driving an hour and a half, 17 miles every day, one way. So it was a 3-hour round trip roughly to commute. My now ex-wife had been a real estate agent since about 2006. I went and got my license. We started working together as a team, increased her, her sales, basically doubled them the first year. I got into a small accident, and a ruptured disc that I had got much worse than it. And so I was not able to work as much, ended up having to have spinal surgery. 2 months later, she and I split up, and I was like, look, I've been wanting to move back to Georgia anyway. So in September 2019, 2 months after spinal surgery, I drove from LA back to Savannah, and I've been here ever since.
Dang.
I got my Georgia license here in January of 2020 through Reciprocity, and started hitting the ground running, and did about last year did about $4.5 million in transactions. Last year, I expect to double that this year.
Dang.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, there's a lot. So
let me ask you.
So
just going back. Okay,
yeah.
When you're going from the world of acting and being around producers and all that
Yep.
stuff to moving into like corporate.
Yeah.
Was that like that had to have been kind of a dramatic transition. I mean,
It was,
those two worlds operate.
they are completely different. Although I had kind of, Hollywood was, and to this day is, very loosey goosey. I think it's getting better. As you've seen all these scandals that come out about these Hollywood people who treat people badly and are very harassing. Luckily, I never really experienced that. I did get a job offer from a producer who has a reputation for being that kind of person. And I was like, there's no way I won't want to work. A, I don't want to work for that person. B, the first time they throw something at me, it's going right back at them. So we would not be a good fit, but thank you for the offer.
Right.
So yeah, and it was completely different. Toyota is very straight-laced, super, super conservative, probably more conservative than even a lot of American companies. The Japanese wanted to make sure that, and the Koreans as well, working for Hyundai, want to make sure that everything's by the book. And whereas if I'm on a movie set and, one of the producers comes up to me and, hey, we need this actor to stay on set for another 2 hours. However, if we don't get him back to his hotel room by X amount of time, we incur $50,000 in overage fees per his contract. Can you figure out a solution? I'm like, okay. So 20 minutes before he's supposed to leave, I have a helicopter land on the set to take him back to the hotel room. And they're like, that was great. I was like, it was $10,000 rather than 50. They're like, perfect. Let's, and you're spending other people's money all the time.
Like there's no sense of fiscal
Well, I mean, movie companies are set up to spend money. Like when in production, you're spending money. That's the only job is you're supposed to deliver the movie, but you have X amount of money to spend to deliver it. And you either spend it all or a little bit over sometimes.
Never under.
Never under. I don't think I've ever, no movie that I worked on ever went under.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And so the way I understand it too is like there's a lot of private investors that invest in individual movies, right? Like they raise money for these movies.
Yep, there are. Yep.
I feel like as a private investor, could you imagine like you put, I don't know, $1 million into a movie and you're like watching somebody say, oh, hey, great, we just spent $10,000 to get a actor back to his hotel like on time.
Well, and then they were like, why'd you spend that? I was like, well, because it was going to be 50 if we didn't get him back on time.
Who would agree to pay 50 for?
Sometimes you just have to sometimes you have to do it to get the shot.
Yeah.
Depending on who the actor is. Yep.
That's still hard to wrap my head around, I don't know.
Yeah. It's very interesting. Like I said, it's very loosey-goosey. But going into a corporate environment where every penny you have to get somebody to sign off on, I was like, oh my God, it's driving me crazy. But you just adapt and move on.
Did you miss doing the producing like when you went to corporate America?
I did in some instances, but it's especially when you're working on marketing, it's production, but on a different type of level. So you're working on a production of commercials often, of extra videos, of social media assets, you're looking at an overall campaign and producing that. It's, the skill set to me is pretty similar. It's just, making those subtle shifts.
I got you.
Yeah.
And then, so skipping forward,
Mm-hmm.
Once you get out of corporate America, so what did you get your license while you were still in that world, or it was like afterwards?
I was still in that world. Originally, it's this funny story. I had originally gotten my license because we were trying to put my son in a specific school district where we did not live, and the homes in that school district are, multi-million dollars.
Right.
However, if you work in that school district, you can send your child to school there. So that's originally why I got my license. I actually never did place my license with that company. And I did with an affiliate of them. But once he started in the grade school in that school system, they didn't really care where he lived after that. So
They were like,
yeah, just fine. It's fine. Whatever. He's a good kid. Just let him go through.
and so what year was that then? That would have
That
been.
was so. When did I get I think I got my Georgia license in 2017. Yeah, middle of 2017.
So did you actually end up selling any house in California? You waited till you got here. Well, actually,
No, I
you
did.
You said
Yeah.
you teamed up with your wife,
Yeah.
right?
So in 2018, my ex-wife and I
Or your ex-wife,
worked.
sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. We worked as a team together, and we actually worked great together. I liked going out and showing, 5, 6, 7 houses in a day. I liked going to, different real estate events. She really preferred doing the paperwork and negotiating and things like that. So, our skill sets were complementary.
Do you being back in Savannah what is real estate like here versus in California? Is it like completely different?
It's similar in most ways. A couple of the differences are the zeros on the end of the contracts are different.
Yeah.
The last house that I sold in California was about 1,700 square foot house on probably a 6,000 square foot lot. It was built in 1953. It had no updates. It was all original kitchen, plumbing, bathrooms. Maybe the carpet had been changed in the 70s. And that house sold in 5 days for $800,000. So over here, that's a $250,000 house, roughly.
Not updated, maybe even less.
Yeah, probably less if it's not updated, but comparable size. It's like I have a listing right now on 66 in Reynolds, which is a 12,000 square foot lot, and that house is listed for $229,000. So
sounds like a shock.
Yeah. So I was like, all right, just got to adjust down a little bit. The other big change for me was people in Savannah. I'd hear, friends with lots of people in Savannah they were talking about the traffic, and I'm like, I can be on one side of town to the other in 20 minutes. This is not bad traffic. I mean, driving out I-16 sometimes if you're trying to go towards Pooler when it's rush hour, it's bad. But I mean, that's rush hour anywhere.
And it's not. I mean, like within an hour, it's all cleared up, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The other big difference is in California we do escrow closings versus attorney closings here.
Yeah. So what is
Georgia.
how is the closing process in California? Why don't you just break that down?
Yeah. So the closing process in California is basically once you have a offer accepted, you do your inspections, you renegotiate or get money back based on what your arrangement is as far as repairs or no repairs. And then basically after that, it's hands off to the escrow company until, you get you clear to close from your lender. The client goes to the escrow office and signs all the paperwork, and that's it.
And what is the escrow company? An escrow company is like a title company?
Yeah. Well, they're two different things. So escrow company, they hold the money for the loan until both parties sign off, and then they do the transfer of the money, and they charge you a certain amount per $1,000 to do that. So it's a lot more expensive to close in California than it is here in Georgia.
Yeah. Does that make it hard for wholesalers? Like, could you really be how big is wholesaling in LA?
It depends on the scale. I mean, I knew somebody who did very large scale wholesaling, 50 to 100 homes at a time. And, that's just such a much longer and much more complicated process. But you can do it.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot easier here to do wholesale deals. You knock on doors, you find somebody who's, wants to sell their house. You say, all right, let's do it. We'll go talk to an attorney and you're done.
Right.
Yeah. You still have to go through escrow in California, and it's just a pain.
Yeah, I can imagine that would make your why do they charge so much too? Why do they is there like a reason? What's the benefit of doing that whole escrow system?
No idea.
It's
just how it is. Yeah, I did not see a benefit to it. It's just different.
Right.
Yep.
Like all things in
California.
Yeah.
Yeah. Different and more complicated for no reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that like So when you moved back to Savannah,
Yep.
You immediately got into real estate.
Yep.
And did you work for Keller Williams when you were in California?
I did. So when I came to town, I have a lot of friends that are realtors here in town. Some are brokers at this point. And I interviewed with a lot of them, and they had a lot of great things to offer. But ultimately, I'm happy with Keller Williams at this point, with the culture of the company, with the training they offer, with the systems that they have available to you. And it just I was also going through a divorce, so I was like trying to simplify other areas of my life.
Right.
So it made sense just for continuity purposes, just to, I had all of my everything set up for Keller Williams, so it was pretty easy transition.
How long have you been with Keller Williams?
So I joined the Keller Williams in California in 2017, and it's 2021. Was that 4 years? 4 years. Yeah.
Do you have any investments?
Not anymore. Not since I got divorced. Yeah.
You did before though?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I primarily invested in stocks, mainly because out in California, the prices of homes and rentals out there and everything is really cost prohibitive unless you have lots and lots of money. I had at one time had a rental property on Tybee that my sister and I co-owned. It had been our parents' house. We inherited, and this was pre-Airbnb. We had it as a long-term rental, and we sold it in, I think around 2010 or 2011. God, I wish I would have kept that.
Yeah, seriously.
And then I put, I've been pretty good about, my stock investments. I invested in Apple in 2004. I invested in Netflix in 2009, 2010. So I've been pretty good with, looking at a company, at their fundamentals or where they're going as a company. I bought Apple after I bought my first iPod. And I said, these are going to be the guys the first to do all-in-one phone device. And, thank God, a few years later they did.
Yeah.
And I invested in Netflix after I became a customer and saw their product. And, I kept up with them on the news cycle and saw that they were going to expand to other countries. I'm like, all right, if I invest in them now and they expand to other countries in, a year and a half, the stock price is going to go up because the subscribership is going to go up.
Right.
So
no brainer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
It's no brainer in hindsight. 2020, right? But
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that
when
was
you simplify like that. It seems like a no brainer.
Yeah, those have been two good investments for me.
Have you ever made a really poor one? What's one that you thought was going to knock out of the park that didn't?
I didn't do well on Google because I didn't hold it long enough. I feel like. I took in when the crash started happening in 2007, I took my entire portfolio to cash and I let it sit there a little too long. I should have bought back in right after the first crash, but I was a little gun shy and I didn't know what was happening. I did that Netflix investment was one of the first ones that I made, and then I kind of slowly got into things. But also things were a little bit volatile there. So during that time, I wish I would have held on to everything a little bit longer.
Right.
To be honest,
Yeah. I heard a good thing. Actually, Aaron Miller here was on the show. He said that when he was a young man, that somebody told him when you buy real estate, never sell.
Yeah.
And he never has, and now.
Yeah.
All that stuff. like if you had kept that timey,
shoulda,
coulda, but.
Oh yeah.
The best time to buy real estate is today and 20 years ago, right?
That's right. Yep.
Let me ask you this: when you guys were in California, you and your wife, was it just or ex-wife? Sorry.
That's right.
Was it just a 2-person team, or did you guys have?
It was a 2-person team, and then we had a lender that we worked with very closely, and a specific title and escrow company that we worked with really closely on almost all our deals. So it was us and an extended team of support.
So when you coming here, do you expect to just keep it small forever, or do you have plans to expand, or what's your vision?
I'd like to to build my own team. I've had offers from 3 or 4 different bigger teams in town to join them, and I'm maybe considering that at this point until I, get my legs under me a little bit more. The Savannah market, it's different. And especially me after coming back after being away for 25 years, I know a lot of people, but getting to earn their trust and getting their business is another thing, And of course, everybody knows 10 realtors. So,
right.
Yep.
What advantage do you have coming to this market from California?
I think probably my biggest advantage is that I look at things a little more holistically. I'm not looking just to make a deal and make money and sell somebody a piece of property. I want to make sure that it fits into their long-term goals. And some people I've said, you know what, it's not time for you to buy, or, I know you want this bigger, more expensive piece of property. However, I think at this point, this one that is, a little bit more within your means, let's go with that. And you can move up to something like that in 5 years. So I'm not trying to push somebody into a transaction just so I can get a paycheck. I want to make sure that it's something that's going to be good for them long term.
Right.
Yeah.
What does that come from, do you think?
I think it comes from seeing my dad. My dad was a blue collar guy, very intelligent. He was mechanically inclined. He was not very good investment minded. He was good at saving money, but he wasn't really good at, looking at investments and saying, oh, I think that is a good investment. There were a couple times where he gave a large amount of cash, at least to him, to somebody to manage. And 5 years later, that was gone. So I don't want to be, that person who, took somebody's money or their life savings that they're putting into a real estate transaction that, 5 years later, they're like, oh my God, Sean screwed us over. It was the worst decision ever.
Right.
So, yeah.
What kind of questions do you ask to kind of figure that out? You know what I mean? Do you have like some go-tos that you...
Well, in most cases, it's about your income, your long-term goals, where do you want to live, what stage of life are you at, where do you want your kids to go to school, are you going to send them to public school or private school? It's a big question here in Savannah because private schools are so expensive, and there are only a few really good public school options here in the area. Sometimes... you're dealing with, I just sold a house over in Gordonston to a couple from San Francisco who they don't have any kids. And I'm like, perfect. This is a great neighborhood for you. You can get a nice, big, old Savannah style house that's 5 minutes from downtown for, a quarter of the price of, the downtown townhouses.
Right.
Yep.
What neighborhoods are there specific neighborhoods that you see in Savannah that you think are going to experience the most growth? So you saw what it looked like 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a unique perspective because a lot of people are transplants here.
Yep.
So seeing what has transpired in the last 25 years and looking forward to the next 25 years.
Yep.
What areas of town do you think are going to...
So I think downtown back when I lived here before was not great. It was, I lived on a row house on Taylor Street. It was a 4-story house, and it had been cut up into 4 different apartments. My rent was $385 a month. That same house is under contract now for $3.3 million. Now, granted, it's been completely restored. Savannah has changed dramatically. Everybody wants to live downtown if they could.
Right.
So I think as you see the growth of coming south from downtown, we're probably at, we're somewhere between Park Avenue and 37th Street as far as, restoration goes and gentrification as well. So there are pockets of neighborhoods in that area that are, have been restored or new houses are built there. I think that area is going to continue to grow and be a good investment long term. You hear people talk about Starland a lot, which I believe is another good investment. The Landings right now is experiencing an amazing turnover as older folks either pass away, move out of there into assisted living, move into condos, and a younger generation is moving in there, and buying some of those whole homes that are wonderfully constructed homes, but maybe a little outdated from the 70s and 80s, and they're going in and, updating them. I think that's an area that's going to continue to experience growth. One of the little other pockets we were talking about in the office the other day is Sylvan Terrace. Do you know where that is?
I actually just did a flip in Sylvan Terrace.
Yeah, Sylvan Terrace, I think, is going to experience a complete revitalization as well. We actually lived there when I was very little before we moved out to Tybee, and it's a beautiful neighborhood. The quality of construction of those homes, as you can probably attest to, or maybe not, is very high.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a ton of potential in there. Just not a lot goes on the market. People tend to, it's like a lot of the neighborhoods in Savannah, they move in there and stay there because it's such a great neighborhood.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you feel about like the fringes on like the west and the east side?
Wow, it's tough. At some point you have to take into consideration what the crime looks like and what people feel comfortable with. I think for single people or families that have no kids, those probably are okay right now, and they may be in the future okay as well. But for right now, I think those are probably going to be the last areas that I recommend. I'd recommend Sylvan Terrace before one of those areas because I just love the neighborhood.
It's funny, you can almost like attach Sylvan Terrace to like that end of Ardsley Park though.
Yeah, it's it was like the new Ardsley Park when it was built. Back when I was a kid, it was primarily a Jewish neighborhood, and there's still a lot of Jewish families that own property in there. There's a very few that live in there, but there's a lot that own property in there. So like I said, I think that's going to be a hidden jewel over probably the next 5 years.
What other things in Savannah have you seen that have changed since you were here last? Like when you came back into town, what were you like most shocked to see?
I continue to be shocked at how busy downtown is. Back when I was here in the late 80s, and I still lived up there. I lived in there until 95, but I was working a lot, so I wasn't as aware. But there was a lot of crime downtown. It was, at the probably 90, 91, it was kind of the peak of the crack years. And so there was lots and lots of crime. I was a bartender up until 91, and every bartender I know carried a gun because everybody had gotten robbed after leaving work. You leave your bar with a couple $100 of cash in your pocket, and there's somebody waiting out in the alley for you with a gun. So we all started carrying guns back then. It's pretty amazing. So I continue to be surprised and delighted about how many people are downtown. I think it's wonderful for Savannah. A couple other things are, SCAD has expanded, exponentially. And I think, there's plus and minuses. There are SCAD haters, there are SCAD lovers. I think Savannah would not be the city that it is today without SCAD. They've brought such a diversity of students and knowledge into town, as well as all the restorations on the properties that they have acquired, I think has been wonderful for the city. So that was a big change, and I was happy to see that as well. And surprised, I didn't realize that they had acquired so many buildings until I started driving around. I'm like, oh, SCAD. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, you start clicking around Sages, you're like, whoa.
Yeah. Also, Tybee has completely changed.
I was going to ask about that, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was a kid, Tybee was the least expensive place in Chatham County to live. It was ridiculously cheap, and we were called Tybee trash because people thought, oh, you can't afford to live anywhere else, so you live out in Tybee. Now, I don't know if I could afford to. I guess I could afford to buy a house on Tybee, but it's super expensive. For a decent place on Tybee is $500,000, $600,000 if you can find one. There's not a lot of long-term rentals on Tybee. Everybody is doing short-term rentals because they make so much money. It's gotten built up by lots of new construction, lots of condominiums, townhouses, things like that. So it's not the Tybee that I grew up on, it's still got that flavor a little bit, but it's completely different than from when I left.
When you were a kid, was there a lot of tourism in Savannah at all?
There was tourism, but not anything like it is today. It's,
Like, do they upkeep the squares like they do now? Or?
no,
Okay,
no. It was not uncommon. I lived on Monterey Square, like I said, all through college, on and off. I lived in the same apartment probably 3 different times with different roommates. Monterey Square, which is where Mercer House is. And it was not uncommon to see prostitutes in the square. You'd see people, gay men, cruising the square at night, things like that. It was very, very seedy still downtown.
It's hard to believe all the crime in those, like, because they're so well upkept now.
Yeah,
know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And I think they were kept up. I just don't think the attention or the budget was there to really, make them as safe as they are today.
Right.
Yeah.
What about like traffic on Tybee? So I get that, like the people that live there but like, was there still just as many people that went to the beaches? And
no, there's a lot more people that go to the beach now for sure. Back when I was a kid, North Beach was just locals. I mean, you might go there and see 100 people that were all locals, and sometimes during some of the like earlier months in the year, like March, you might not see anybody. You go down by yourself and crab right off the beach. And now North Beach is packed, just as much as the south end of the island is. So it's completely different. And it's been great for, I have a lot of friends that own businesses out there, and they're all doing well, and I think it's great.
It's really weird. Why do you think that changed?
I think there's obviously been a big demographic change in the country, with millennials who are now, coming of age. They're starting to buy houses themselves. And it's just been a big demographic shift. Like if you go downtown now, I just heard last week or a week before that Savannah is the number 2 bachelorette destination in the country after Nashville. So you'll see all these young people who are out and walking around and experiencing the city and spending money, and they go to the beach and they like to do fun things, which, hey, I'm all for all those things.
Yeah, I just wonder why that shift. Like I wonder, like why didn't bachelorettes come in the late 80s? Do you know what I mean? Like I wonder why
Well, I think Savannah has people become more aware of Savannah. With the Midnight of the Garden of Good and Evil book, subsequent movie with Forrest Gump being filmed here, it just kind of projected Savannah into a different place than it was before. And it's such a wonderful, beautiful city that you come here and a lot of people just fall in love with it.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true.
Yeah.
Something also I wanted to get into a little bit with you was
Sure.
you helped produce Forrest Gump.
I didn't produce it. I was a production assistant.
Assistant.
I was like the lowest on the totem pole. Like,
okay.
Tom Hanks needs a Coke. Can somebody go get him a Coke? I'll go get him a Coke. Yeah.
I got you. Okay.
Yeah, but it was a lot of fun. I started off when we were doing the majority of the Gump House filming, which was actually a set over in Beaufort. Was it Beaufort or Bluffton? I can't remember. It's been so long ago. But it was a set over there, and Jenny's house was, a half a block away on a different piece of the property, and some of the fields were very close by. So I started out over there, and I really didn't know what it was. Like, I had just worked on my second movie with Hume and Jessica, and I came into town for the weekend, and Laura Bryant, who's a local locations person, said, "Hey, they're doing a movie out over in South Carolina, and they need help. Why don't you come to the set, and I'll introduce you to the assistant director." And so I went, and the assistant director said, "Can you start tomorrow?" And I was like, "Sure." So, I worked on the Gump House. I worked on all those scenes with Forrest and Bubba, in the barracks, talking about all the shrimp, Bubba getting blown up, all those scenes, and then all the scenes they shot in Savannah on the square downtown, Chippewa, I think it is. and a lot of the stuff that we shot out by where Fraser Homes was off of Bay Street.
In a situation like that, are you like mingling with the actors and like, I don't know. I've never, I mean, most people I would say have never even been in a situation like that.
Yeah, it depends on the set, really. I think in my case, I was more comfortable just going up to random people and talking to them, and I always have. I had worked, the movie that I worked on right before Forrest Gump, I became friends with one of the actors there. He was a guy named Frank Whaley. He's a character actor. And he had just worked on another movie that I can't remember the name of. I think it was Newsies or something like that. He had worked on a movie with Gary Sinise. And so he told me, he's like, hey, tell Gary I said, hey. So I didn't know who Gary Sinise, that was one of his first big movies, Forrest Gump. He was, primarily a character and stage actor up to then. So I was like, walked over and said, hey, Gary, I was just working with Frank Whaley. He said to tell you hello. He's like, oh, what were you? We just started this conversation, and it kind of, from then on, you just kind of talk to people like you're normally talk to people, and I think they respect it for the most part, rather than, like, oh, don't say this around them.
Right.
It was funny. One of the things they used to do, and they still do in the film industry, the production assistants, if one of the main actors is walking from their trailer onto the set, they'll get on the walkie-talkie and say, Tom Hanks is walking in, Tom Hanks is walking in. So I did that once when I saw him, and then one of the other assistant directors pulled me aside and he said, hey, Tom hates when you do that. I'm like, oh, okay, I won't do that again then. So I happened to be standing in front of his trailer when he walked out, and I was like, Tom is walking in, Tom is walking in. And he looked at me, and I was like, just kidding. And so from then on, he and I just kind of talked a couple times. I met his wife, and she ended up being in the movie Now and Then that we shot like a year and a half later here in Savannah. And she actually helped me get the job working for the director that brought me back to LA. She recommended me for that. So
dang, that's crazy.
Yeah.
It's all because you were standing outside of his trailer.
Yeah, goofing off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny because not only have you seen, so Savannah's really only known for two things, which is like real estate and art, SCAD,
Yeah.
right? And it's like kind of offshoot of that, I would say, is like film production.
Yeah.
Almost like a third, really. But and so you've really got to see the transformation of two major industries here.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
even though you did those few movies here, I imagine film production in Savannah and Georgia in general was nothing then compared to what it is now.
No, there was like one movie every 2 to 3 years, maybe, if we were lucky. I know I put a lot of that, the success of the film industry, Stratton Leopold had a lot to do with it. He has always campaigned for Georgia to be a location. He was very good friends with the original heads of the Georgia Film Commission, who helped put in those tax incentives that are one of the primary reasons that so many films are shot in Georgia in general now. And I think we have 2 or 3 movies shooting here right now.
Just right now, yeah.
Just right now, yeah.
That's crazy.
I just told you earlier, I went to St. Paul's Orthodox Church over on Anderson Street for a visitation this morning. And as I was parking, there was a Tony's Food Service truck who's based out of Van Nuys, California, parked on the street. And I was like, hey, what are you guys shooting over there? Like, oh, we're shooting this little vampire movie for Netflix here. I'm like, oh, okay.
Dang.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about getting back into film or like?
So interestingly enough, when I moved back in town, I got my headshots done by a local photographer here named Anthony Paderewski, who's also a location person and actor himself. And he's like, so what are we doing these headshots for? And I'm like, oh, just for real estate. And he's like, dude, I'm sending these to my agent because you've got to look. And I was like, look, you don't know, but I worked in the film industry all these years. And he was like, just try it. So I've been doing, auditions. I haven't gotten any roles yet because I probably can't act, to be honest. But he was like, you look you look good on film, so let's see what we can do. You know, it's funny. I had been offered to audition for a role yesterday, and it was a bigger role with a recurring role for a known network. And I was like, oh, I don't think I'm going to get that because I'm in competition with all these actors from Atlanta. And so I declined it. And my agent texted me. He was like, dude, just go ahead and do it. He said, they saw your role. You're real. They like it enough that they want you to audition. Just go ahead and audition and see what happens. So I did that yesterday. So, yeah, it's been interesting for me, I was always behind the scenes. And I was always friendly with, you know, most of the cast that I worked with because, you know, I started out working with cast members, and that kind of followed through. And when they heard, oh, you worked with Hugh and Jessica, and they'll come up and ask me, you know, oh, do you have any good stories? I'm like, oh, yeah, I got tons of good stories from them. Yeah.
What's your best story from when you were working in the film industry? So
one of the stories that people enjoy hearing is when I first moved to Los Angeles, I was dating a girl who was an actress / waitress, mostly waitress. And her good friend at the time was Chelsea Handler. And they were known for being party girls, these two together. And I got to the point after I dated this girl probably 8 months where I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot deal with all this actress drama and partying anymore. So I broke up with her. I broke up with her New Year's Eve. Excuse me. I go into our office the next Monday. At this point, I was working on helping set up the first digital production company in Japan. And we had an office in Santa Monica. We had a bunch of artists that we had hired in Japan. And so we had hired people from like Pixar and Lucasfilm to help train the traditional Japanese artists on how to use digital tools. One of the producers was a girl named Marisa Cody. Marisa's husband had just written the first X-Men movie. And we were all friends. We all went out to lunch that Monday, and David, Marissa's husband, says, oh, you broke up with that girl finally? I'm like, yeah. He's like, I want to introduce you to this girl. I think let's do a double date. And I was like, okay, well, tell me about her. And he's like, oh, she's really tall, blonde hair, blue eyes. She's South African. She's gorgeous. She's been a model. I'm like, wait, whoa. Wait, what does she do now? She's an actress. And I'm like, dude, I just broke up with an actress and basically her best friend actress who I was around all the time. I do not want to go out with another actress ever again. And that was when I turned down a date with Charlize Theron.
Dang.
Yeah. And so when she would come on TV, I would tell my now ex-wife, I'd be like, look, that could have been my first ex-wife right there, because she's a little nutty. But
maybe you did dodge a bullet. Just
I
because they're
probably
famous
did.
doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, no,
right? Like,
no.
If anything, I would say, would you think that living in LA had kind of made you realize, like, you know, I've met a few people from LA and they seem to have their head on their shoulders a little bit more about perspective as far as like fame is not all it's cracked up to be.
Yeah, I think I learned fame and money are not all they're cracked up to be. While I was there, I knew and worked for people who were beautiful and or had money, and that has nothing to do with your happiness and contentness in life. In fact, and many times I found it to have an inverse effect on how happy you are with yourself, how happy you are with your surroundings. You know, a lot of the wealthy people that I know would constantly be acquiring like a new this, or it's a new car, or $40,000 in clothes, or a new 20,000 square foot mansion, and they're still miserable. And, you know, I was like, you know what, if I can be happy and content with less, I'm going to try and do it that way. So today I live life pretty simply. I live in a very small place. I don't have a lot to clean up, worry about, pay taxes on, all those kinds of things. I'm just kind of happy being in a smaller place, and I go out and enjoy my life. And all during COVID, people are like, "Oh, you must be miserable." I'm like, "No, I'm having a great time." I got a lot of flack from people like, "Oh, you shouldn't be going out with us." I'm like, "Look, if that's the thing that kills me, that's the thing that kills me." I know that it's been horrible for a lot of people, and they have lost loved ones, and I'm not trying to devalue that in any way. I understand that, but also I don't think that I would have been in the place that I am now had I stopped living my life because of it. And I had COVID, and I survived it, and I've had my 2 vaccinations, and I don't think I'll have any problems with it ever again.
I think a lot of people are chasing after happiness. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
What was that process like? What did it like? Was it a mindset shift, or was it a process of years? Or
Yeah, I think seeing it, I grew up on Tybee, lower middle class. My parents sacrificed to send me to BC. I got my college degree, and I was like chasing after the dollars. And once I got out to California and saw the people who, made millions of dollars in the either acting, producing, writing, all those different things, I was like, wow, these people have everything, but they don't seem happy in life or happy with what they have. So, I wanted a 5,000, 10,000 square foot house. I wanted, 5 cars, and all those things. And once I got to the level where I could start acquiring those things, I was like, wow, I don't want another car that I'm gonna have to put gas in and pay insurance on and have to worry about getting scratched and all those things. And I lived in a 2,000 square foot house, and by the time my son was in high school, half the house was empty. And I'm like, so I think just that different stage in life that I became in, I was like, you know what, I don't need a whole lot, or I really don't want a whole lot, because it does not make you happy.
And you think that downsizing was the key to finding like the happiness that you have right now?
I think so. And being happy with, experiences and going out and meeting new people. And, sometimes I've had great times. I'll stop by one of the bars downtown or on Tybee and just have a beer or two and talk to the person next to me and have, it's just great. It's a great experience.
Do you ever find that, so earlier you said that you did like $4.5 million in transactions last year, and you're trying to double that this year.
Yeah.
Do you find so you clearly have like competitiveness inside of you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like that ever challenges that happiness?
Like
when it's let down or?
No, honestly, I wanted to hit 5 million last year, and I didn't. But I was like, you know what? Considering it's my first year in town, COVID for 8 months, 9 months out of the year, I was like, no, I'm happy. I'm good. And
that was that. Just
that
made
was
a
that
decision and
yeah. Yeah.
It seems hard to believe, but it might just be because we're not hard to believe, but hard to imagine doing myself. But I wonder if it's because of like difference in life stage, I guess.
Maybe.
In your 20s, I guess you're way more hungry, or I don't know.
Yeah. I was definitely much more competitive and driven at 27, 28 when I was working for top producers and trying to like help bring in money to the company that I worked for. I worked for a visual effects company. I was like constantly trying to bring in new business. And now I'm just like, you know what? Okay, we're fine.
Do you think that if you hadn't done that though, like if you hadn't been that way in your late 20s, would you have gotten ahead to the point where you can be that way now?
I don't think so. I think that was part of the journey, is like learning to be content with what you have. And even if you have a goal and I missed it by 15%, something like that, still fine. Be happy with yourself for what you accomplished. Look back at where you started, what you accomplished. Okay, I didn't hit that goal, but next year I'll try and do better.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you had been that way in your late 20s, you probably wouldn't.
I don't think so. I think it was part of my journey is to like discover those, look at what I thought was going to make me happy and realize that that doesn't make people happy. And so readjusting my goals and perspective based on that.
Do you still keep do you keep goals in every area of life, or pretty much just like in your for the business part? Whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have short-term goals as far as like my personal life, but business is where I like most men, a big part of me is invested in my business. Like that's what I concentrate on. So,
right.
Yeah.
How many hours a day do you generally work?
8 to 9.
Okay. So
yeah.
Like 5 days a week?
Yeah. 5 to 6, I would say. I tried to take off yesterday and I just ended up, having to do, I got a call from a client, put an offer in, another client wanted to reduce the price on something. So, I probably worked 4 or 5 hours yesterday instead of 8 or 9.
What do you think has helped you? So obviously you have like a little bit of a competitive advantage going all that time in social media.
Yeah.
Doing all that time in social media.
Yeah.
How has that translated to sales now? Like, has that been like a huge part of it or just a little part of it? Or
I think it's probably 25% of it, because it helps with awareness.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anybody that follows me on Facebook or Instagram or any of those social media platforms that doesn't know that I do real estate. There's a lot of realtors who I don't think put out enough real estate centered content. Also, I put out a lot of goofy content too, fun and games and joking around. And honestly, that might be a turnoff to some people, but that's okay. That's part of me.
Right.
So
yeah.
I'm a realtor, but I also like to have fun. I like to go goof around. I like to have a nice drink when I can, all those things.
Do you ever miss doing social media full time? Like, do you miss corporate America?
I miss sometimes the work and the people that I worked with. I was lucky enough to have some really great experiences and work for some great brands and put out a lot of good work. But what I've learned over time also is that those were like special times, or those were unusual times in corporate America because, I happened to be doing work at a time where budgets were plentiful and the people who were in control of them trusted us to do things, and things have changed since then. And, the purse strings are not as loose as they used to be. So, I take those times and I look at them and say, those were great times. We had good work. We worked well together. The people that I worked with were wonderful. That's back there. And so I just enjoyed that part of the journey.
What was it like working for Vaynermedia? I know I'm going to get that. I know for sure. I'm sure you get that question a lot. But
no, it's okay. It was interesting. My final interview that I had was 45 minutes with Gary.
Really?
Yeah.
What was that like?
And it was interesting. Gary is exactly the same person one-on-one that he is, is if you see him on his Gary V TV or whatever. And the first half of that 45 minutes, he interviewed me. And then he said, okay, I'm done interviewing you. Now you can interview me. And, I asked him some very frank questions like, hey, Gary, I know that you say to do these things on your, on your podcast or your the Gary V show. I said, what if I'm going to recommend something to my clients that goes contrary to that? And as long as it's right for the client, then do it. And I said, I don't want to be hired in here because, I'm a rip roaring Gary V fan. I want to be hired in here because I know what I'm doing and I'll do a good job for the company. And he's like, perfect. And so I walked out, and like 5 minutes later, his recruiter called me and said, you're in. Gary said, you're the guy. Working there was a little interesting. It's kind of a scrappy shop. The LA shop is a lot smaller now because Toyota, who was one of their big clients that I primarily worked with, they relocated their headquarters from LA to Plano, Texas. And Vaynermedia was not ready to open a Texas office, so that business left and went to Toyota's other agency, which is Saatchi & Saatchi. But it was a lot of fun. There were actually, during that time is when I started to get a lot of respect for the people that SCAD was putting out in the creative realm, because Vaynermedia in LA and also Vaynermedia in New York has a large number of SCAD graduates that work for them.
Really?
Yeah, they do. So I was like, wow, I had no idea. And some of the people that I worked with were extremely talented. But it was not the experience that I thought it was, but it was a good experience. Gary was shooting his Apple TV show that he had at the time with Will.i.am and Jessica, the girl who founded Honest Company, Jessica Alba.
Okay.
So they were shooting in our offices sometimes, so that was happening as we were. So it was interesting just to, being in the background while this show was shooting, as they're walking around. And it was a great experience. I still have a good relationship with Gary today.
Really?
Yeah.
Dang, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
I guess I never really thought about it, but your whole background going through production and marketing, all that stuff. You said that towards the end, especially at Vaynermedia, you saw a lot of SCAD kids. Did you see a lot of people from SCAD through that whole time?
Not up until that point. And I think it has to do because my primary industry that I worked in was automotive.
Yeah.
Which is the most conservative part of the most conservative vertical of advertising, I would say. So a lot of people that, especially Toyota and Lexus had either come up through the ranks of Toyota and Lexus or their agency, and people had been at the agency for, 15, 20 years, because it's so specific, and the way they do things is very much more like Mad Men than Vaynermedia, which is very new and flexible, and we do things differently and things like that. So the people that when I joined Vaynermedia, I was helping to set up their automotive shop because they really didn't have any people with automotive experience in the agency at that time. So we pulled people in who had worked on other accounts, and I think 3 or 4 of them were SCAD graduates, and just the creativity was wonderful, and those people have gone on to have great careers as well.
What is the difference, do you think? Like, how can you learn to be creative?
I think you can learn to be creative. I would not consider myself necessarily a very creative person. I think, I tend to be more like on the Asperger side, to be honest, which, very logical for the most part, but I'm good at seeing patterns. So when I worked on a campaign, I was primarily concerned with, okay, does this resonate with the audience that we are trying to hit? And then do all the parts of the campaign make sense as a whole? So, I would leave the creativity up to the creative people, and I'm pretty good at recognizing the creativity. A lot of times I'll be like, okay, that's great. Let's roll with that. Or can we do something like this and combine these two ideas? And I think that's where my strengths came from. There are certainly people that are much more creative than I am, but I think I was just able to recognize it.
Kind of a piggyback off that question that is, what patterns do you see in realtors and investors that you think they could be better marketers? Like, what marketing, there's got to be things that you must see in the industry that are like.
I'm going to say something that's probably, this is said a lot among realtors. I don't know if it's ever been said out loud and on a podcast, and it's probably going to get me a lot of trouble. But 90% of realtors are lazy. Not a lot of people talk about this, and I think working harder and working more as a realtor, not as, there's a lot of realtors that have lots of, other jobs. Like in my case, I do these little auditions on the side, but primarily my income comes from real estate and from the investments that I made before. So I'm focused on that almost all the time. If I'm at a bar and I hear somebody overhear somebody talking about a real estate transaction or wanting to move or wonder what our house is worth, I will interject myself and work my way into that conversation. I also work probably more hours a day than most realtors. So I think working harder and longer and also makes you aware of opportunities when they come up. And I think that goes for the same as people who are real estate investors or flippers or whatever. The more you're out there and doing the work, the more the opportunity is going to come to you.
Yeah, that's great advice. I definitely agree with you. I think that I don't think it's just realtors either. I would say like most people. I don't know if
most people in life. Yeah,
lazy is necessarily the right word, but maybe just like busy but not productive.
Yeah.
Yeah, or, you know what I mean? 'Cause I think everybody feels like
a lot of people are just comfortable too with where they are, and I mean where I'm comfortable in who I am, but I always want to be better.
Right.
A better person, me, but better.
I don't know if that's something you can teach.
Yeah, I think it's something that's inside you.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
Have you found that to be genetic? Like, did you have like any relatives that were entrepreneurial or anything?
Yeah, my grandfather on my mom's side, he grew up in Richmond Hill. His first job, he was an errand boy for Henry Ford. He moved to Savannah in 1935 and went to Armstrong College at that time for a year. He met Herb Traub, and they became good friends, and they opened the Pirates House together. And he and Herb went on to own 4 restaurants in town at one time. So it was the Pirates House, Our House, which is on the corner of Victory and Skidaway, where the Starbucks is now.
Yeah.
That mid-century modern building.
I thought that used to be a church, to be honest.
No, it was a restaurant. So there was an original Our House there that was like a more traditional looking Savannah building that burned down. And when my grandfather rebuilt it, he wanted it something a little more modern, which turned out to be not good for business because people were like, oh, we like the old Our House better. But anyway. And then they owned another a drive-in called the Triple X that was right across from the Banana Stadium, and another one out on Highway 17 called Harvest House. So he was very entrepreneurial. He ran restaurants until he was I think he was 75 when he retired sold his last restaurant. And then he actually started selling real estate because he got bored in retirement down in Richmond Hill and sold Piercefield Forest, which was one of the first little subdivisions out there had to be early mid 80s time.
So real estate's like reoccurring in your family.
It's a reoccurring theme. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. If you go back and give advice to like, I guess your 27-year-old self, whenever you first started, what advice would you give yourself?
It's funny because I'm doing that with my son right now. My son's 20. He finished a year of college, was not motivated, wasn't sure what he should do, and he was kicking around this idea of getting his real estate license or getting a mortgage license. And I said, do either one. Get into this industry now because it's one of those industries that, I've never seen have as much opportunity in so many different areas. You can be a realtor, you can be a broker, you can be a flipper, you can be in construction, you can be in mortgage. You can be an inspector. You can be an appraiser. You can do all those different things. You just have so many different areas to work in within the single industry. And it's an industry that, property is almost never worth zero. You know, it's not like stocks that can crash and be worth zero, or the company goes out of business and be zero. Real estate is always going to be worth something.
Right.
Yeah, it's tangible.
What, seeing all the success that you saw in LA and everything you've seen here, it's kind of a reoccurring theme that keeps coming up, is giving to get. How much do you feel like that plays into anything, any success that you've had?
Well, I don't know if that I never worked to be successful. Like I wanted just to do good work no matter what I did. So it was like I wanted to be proud of the work that I did, not, oh, I'm reached this, you know, I'm a vice president at Vaynermedia. I worked this. Like the title could mean nothing to me. I wanted to do good work and have people have fun while we're working too, because that's another thing that I saw. Like I've had more than my share of people that I worked for who made me miserable or were miserable to work for, and I never wanted to be that person. A lot of the work that you do, especially in advertising and media and the film industry, is very high stress. There's lots of money involved, and there's lots of mistakes that are made that cost a lot of money, but it doesn't matter as long if you know life's going to keep going on. Let's do the best that we can, have fun while we're doing it, and be proud of what we accomplished. That's good. And if it didn't do good, then yep, you know what? We can't win them all.
That seems like a good note to end on. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. Let's do it again.
All right, man. Let's do. Oh, where can people find you?
Oh, sure. SeanWilliamsTeam.com. Anybody can call me too or text me 912-508-5477.
Cheers, man. Thanks
Cheers.
for coming on. Take it easy. Hey, y'all. Thank you so much for listening this week. If you want to show some support, please head on over to mpgpodcast.com. Check out the awesome merch we have on there. And also subscribe and comment wherever you listen to this. That does huge things for pushing us up on the algorithm, whether it's on Spotify, Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, whatever it is, whatever platform you use. Go right now. Go subscribe. Go comment. Help push us up. And also, please share us on your social media. The more listens we get, the more I can bring, more guests I can bring in, the more value I can bring you guys. So thanks so much. It's a total team effort. I appreciate all the support. And I hope you all have a great week. See you guys next week.